was supposed to be a simple inheritance. No drama, no strings attached. Just a dusty, crumbling house on the edge of nowhere, left to her in a will from a great-aunt she had never met. The kind of relative you only hear about through stories, rumors, really half-whispered at family reunions. But Ava didn't care about the mystery. She needed a break. Life had pressed too hard on her lately. A job she couldn't stand, rent she couldn't afford, and the gnawing sense that she was drifting, with no direction. So when the letter arrived with official stamps and a lawyer's name she couldn't pronounce, she packed her bags without thinking twice. The drive was long, winding through fields that seemed untouched by time. Her GPS lost signal somewhere between the cornfields and a rusted sign that read, "Welcome to Astor Hollow, population unknown." By the time she reached the property, the sun had begun its slow descent, casting amber light over the cracked driveway. The house stood at the edge of a forgotten forest, wrapped in ivy and silence. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Its shutters hung loose, the paint peeled like old bark. Yet something about it felt still. Not dead, just waiting. Ava stood in front of the door for longer than she meant to. The key felt heavier in her hand than it should have, as if the metal carried weight beyond its shape. She slid it into the lock, twisted and paused. Something brushed across her spine. A chill, though the air was still warm. She opened the door. The scent hit her first. Not the musty rot of neglect she expected, but something softer, lavender, maybe, and old paper. Light spilled in through stained glass panels, painting the worn floorboards in shades of rose and gold. The air inside was thick, but not unpleasant. It felt occupied, lived in, and yet, no one had stepped foot in here for at least 15 years. According to the letter, she walked carefully, each step echoing slightly too loud. The furniture was still there, covered in white sheets, dust, outlining the silhouettes of chairs and bookshelves. A piano stood by the wall, keys exposed and yellowing, yet oddly well kept. A photo frame rested atop the mantel. Ava wiped away the dust and found a picture of a woman who looked hauntingly like herself, standing in front of the very same house. That's when she noticed the note tucked under the frame. It was handwritten. The ink faded but legible. To the one who finds this house next, some things are meant to be remembered, but not everything should be awakened. Ava read it twice. And then something creaked upstairs. Ava froze. The sound was unmistakable, like the soft groan of an old floorboard under weight. She held her breath, ears straining for another noise. Nothing, just silence, thick and unmoving. She shook her head, tried to laugh it off. It's an old house, she told herself. Wood shifts, the walls settle. That's all, but something inside her disagreed. It wasn't fear, not quite. More like a deep, cold awareness that the house wasn't entirely empty. She moved toward the staircase, hand gliding along the banister covered in a thin film of dust. The stairs creaked under her weight as she climbed, one slow step at a time. The second floor was dim, the hallway stretching longer than it should have for a house this size. Doors lined both sides, all closed, except one at the very end, just barely ajar. The light inside flickered, though there was no electricity. Ava approached the door slowly, heart pounding, her hand trembling slightly as she pushed it open. The room beyond was a bedroom, bathed in a strange bluish glow. The walls were lined with shelves, hundreds of them, each filled with glass jars. Inside the jars were old keys. Dozens, maybe hundreds of keys. Different shapes and sizes, all labeled in delicate handwriting. Room 3, attic door, west cellar. And some with no label at all. In the center of the room sat a small wooden table. On it, a single open journal. Ava approached, pulled out the chair, and sat. The writing inside was frantic, uneven. The ink darker in some places, as if pressed down in a rush. It read, "The house changes when no one is looking. The doors move. The walls breathe. I don't know what it wants, but I know it's watching. I thought I could contain it, but I only fed it. If you're reading this, don't go into the basement." She stared at the words. Her breath quickened. The basement. She hadn't even noticed a basement door when she entered. The main floor had seemed normal, quiet, even charming. But now, that charm peeled away like old wallpaper. The lavender scent had disappeared, replaced by something older, dustier, more primal. Suddenly, she remembered something the lawyer had said offhandedly. "Strange place, that house. Been in your family for generations. No one ever sold it, just passed it down. Why? What was down there?" Back downstairs she searched, until she found it, a narrow wooden door tucked behind a shelf that wasn't fully attached to the wall. It groaned when she pulled it open, revealing a steep staircase descending into darkness. No light, no railing. Just stone steps and cold air rising from below. Ava hesitated. Then, without really deciding to, she descended. With each step, the air thickened. The scent of mold and something metallic filled her nose. Her phone's flashlight barely cut through the gloom. She reached the bottom and found herself in a small chamber. The walls were lined with old trunks and more shelves. But in the center of the floor was a trapdoor, sealed with an iron lock, one that matched the keys upstairs. Without thinking, she turned around, climbed back up, grabbed the journal room key labeled B1 trap, and returned. The lock clicked open easily. What lay beneath wasn't a cellar. It was a passageway, and it led somewhere the house had buried for a long time. The tunnel sloped downward, carved from rough earth and stone, as though it had been dug by hand a century ago and forgotten by time. Ava's footsteps echoed softly behind her, swallowed by damp air and eerie silence. Her flashlight beam quivered as she moved deeper, brushing past cobwebs that hung like curtains. The temperature dropped steadily, and she could feel something shift in the atmosphere. Not cold, not wind, but a pressure, like the air itself was aware of her presence. The tunnel opened into a large underground chamber. Carved symbols lined the stone walls, some faded, others freshly etched. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, and on it, an old wooden box bound in iron straps. It looked fragile, but its presence was overwhelming, as if it didn't belong to this time or place. Ava stepped closer, her breath shallow. There was a note on top of the box, scrawled in a trembling hand. "If you open this, you open everything." Her hands hovered above the lid. She didn't know why she wanted to open it. She just knew that the answer, the reason the house had called to her, why it had been passed down, why it still stood in defiance of decay, was inside. She lifted the lid. There was no treasure, no bones, no photographs. Only a mirror, small, circular, its surface polished and clean despite the dust that coated everything else. She leaned over it. At first, all she saw was her own reflection. Then her face shifted, not changed, replaced. A different woman stared back at her, older, wiser, eyes sunken from sleeplessness, hair streaked with white. The same face from the photo on the mantel. Her great-aunt. The woman in the mirror opened her mouth, but Ava didn't hear words. She felt them, like memories crashing into her mind all at once, images of rituals, doors being locked, whispers through the walls, an entire family line assigned to guard the house, never understanding it fully, only knowing they couldn't let what lived beneath escape. It had chosen her now. Ava dropped the mirror, stumbled back, gasping. The mirror didn't break. Instead, the room around her rippled like water. The carved walls breathed. The stone pedestal pulsed. Something ancient stirred. She ran back through the tunnel, up the stairs, into the house. But it was different now. The windows were bricked over. The doors had shifted. The air buzzed with invisible voices. Ava turned in circles, heart pounding, until finally the house. Calmed. And so did she, because in that moment, she understood. This house hadn't been waiting for someone to visit, it had been waiting for someone to stay. Ava wasn't its prisoner. She was its keeper, now, just as her aunt had been. Just as her ancestors had been before her. The silence, the strange jars, the hidden rooms. They were all part of something older than bloodlines. The house needed a soul to balance its depths. A will to guard what couldn't be released. She had opened the door. And she had frozen, yes, but not in fear, in recognition. She belonged to the house now, and it somehow belonged to her.